and reduce dramatically the average tax increase.
We're not done yet.
No.
And then something came up today, used cars assessment.
Well, look at that. The roof's gonna relax for them.
33%.
Yeah.
I leased my car. When the lease is up, I'm going to buy it because this can be the best investment I've ever made. Because that's a great price.
Yeah.
You know?
No.
That's going to be good. I can't.
For 4 p.m. and I thought we'd call to order the Program Advisory Committee of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. So thanks for everyone being here. And we're starting right at 4 p.m., which was our advertised starting time. MVTC staff followed the procedures and guidelines to give notice to the committee, commission staff, and the public about the committee meeting today. We're back to, Mark says, normal in-person meetings. Normal for MVTC maybe, with a few modifications. The meeting is simultaneously being broadcast to the public on YouTube. The only visual component of this meeting is the presentation slides, which are being shown on the YouTube stream. The meeting presentation was posted on MVTC's website earlier today. I'll now ask Alan Fye, MVTC's Director of Programs and Policy, to call the roll to identify commissioners and MVTC staff present on the call.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Please respond here when you hear your name. Chair Snyder?
Yeah.
Ms. Bagley?
Here.
Ms. Garvey? Mr. Meyer?
Here.
Mr. Faust?
Here.
Mr. Turner? We have a quorum, Mr. Chair. Also identify folks here from MVTC as well. We have MVTC Executive Director Kate Mattice, myself, Alan Fye, and MVTC Computer Choice Program Manager Ben Owen. Turn back over to Mr. Snyder.
Thanks a lot. As today's part of today's meeting materials, you have a copy of the review of our last meeting. Does anybody have any comments about that? Do we need a formal motion to approve or just no? Just any edits, any comments at all? Okay, thanks. Next item on the agenda, the I-66 Commuter Choice FY 2023, FY 2024 program. This is a review of the application eligibility results for I-66 Commuter Choice fiscal year 2023-24. Staff will outline their proposal for a guiding program and strategy to help prioritize uses of the limited funding expected to be available. We'll then receive updates on the Envision Route 7 bus rapid transit project and staff fiscal year 2023 grant applications to the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. Before we get into the presentation on commuter choice, I'll turn things over to Kate for a few brief upfront remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for those who've been involved in the Commuter Choice program in the past, we're getting together a little earlier than usual in this whole process because, as you can probably all appreciate, we still face complex circumstances with our programs about predicting the amount of money that's going to be available and then also the demand for commuter transit services. So we're cautiously optimistic on these fronts as large employers in the area are having some return to office plans in the next couple of months. And of course, we also do have a new administration in Richmond that we expect will put a premium on measurable performance and have already expressed some skepticism as to how transit overall will be able to rebound. So we're obviously watching with a bunch of caution on this. So with all that said, we want to start the discussion with you early about how to prioritize projects for funding with an eye towards being cautious and conservative. We're not yet to the point of looking to you to endorse any program or projects. We still need to score all of the eligible proposals for one, but we're rather hoping today that we can agree on at least a guiding strategy that will make the endorsement easier when we all reconvene in April. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for the context. Ben, you're on now.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for joining us today. We will be talking first about I-66 Commuter Choice fiscal year 23-24 program. So this latest and greatest call for projects closed at the end of January, and our program development process is now getting underway. So one of the first steps in that process, as mentioned, is the eligibility review of all the applications that were submitted. We received 11 total applications from 6 applicants, seeking a total of $23.1 million. This total request decreased to $22.3 million as we confirmed project details of applicants. Of those 11 total applications, there were 5 enhanced bus service proposals. These include renewals of service improvements funded in prior rounds. Total funding request among those of $7.8 million. 2 proposed rail capital improvements seeking $7 million. 1 Tdm strategy seeking about $650,000 exactly. And 3 access to transit projects seeking a total of about $6.8 million. So 9 of the 11 with the $21.8 million total funding request have been deemed eligible and will be carried forward into the technical evaluation process as well as subsequent public comment. We conducted our review in collaboration with the Department of Rail and Public Transportation staff. I appreciate Todd Horsley being here with us today, looking at each proposed project's anticipated benefits to toll payers, as well as consistency with established program policy. So for the 5 enhanced bus service proposals, both rail capital improvements, the Tdm strategy, and 2 of the 3 access to transit proposals were deemed to be eligible. Of the other 2, 1 enhanced bus service project was withdrawn. This was a pretty small proposal for which the applicant actually has enough funding on their current project to cover the service expansion for most of the 2 years. The proposal was for a modest service expansion with a lot of marketing, and if those marketing costs were scaled down kind of in line to the extent of service we actually would be supporting on that route, the project likely would not have met our $30,000 funding award minimum. 1 access to transit project was deemed ineligible concerning renewal of bike share operations. This is not really an issue of the merit of operating bike share, but rather the fit with our program's framework. We can only consider peak period, peak direction trips along the I-66 inside the Beltway corridor in our eligibility review as well as scoring. And though the stations serve a range of trip purposes throughout the day and week, there were very few qualifying trips. So this is kind of the results of the initial yes and no eligibility review, and from here we'll be going on and developing scores for the 9 eligible proposals. So I'm happy to stop for any questions you might have on the eligibility screening.
Questions? Yeah, John.
I might have missed it. Did you say how much money we have yet? Or we haven't gotten to
Yeah, that is coming up.
That's coming up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Conservatively. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Next page.
Yes.
And actually, if I could, because of course we do have a new member, Ms. Bagley, we are happy to pause and give us a little 101 on the program. It is toll revenues in 66 corridor, but there are some very specific parameters.
Yeah.
Because it's only tolled inbound in the morning and outbound in the afternoon. The projects have to benefit the toll payers. And the moving more people with less vehicles is in general, very, very overly supplied. There's a lot of other elements as well. But that's the larger framework of the program.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm between, like, I looked at the minutes beforehand and there was some discussion, and I'm vaguely familiar with the program already, so I'm happy to like listen and learn and ask a question if I. Yeah.
Thanks. Let me clarify one thing. So you're not asking for any sort of preliminary approval of these projects, right?
Right.
So one thing I want to add is City of Falls Church had a very high scoring bus proposal, but it was pulled out at the last round because Metro was going to provide it. Well, it turns out Metro is charging for that, and we in our letter indicated we'd like to reinsert it for reconsideration. So we'll be asking for that in this set of projects. So thanks. So go ahead. Next slide.
So the other your choice piece for today, a general discussion as proposal agnostic as we can make it, given that we haven't scored any projects yet. Concerns just kind of how to approach programming for this round, so that we can identify a guiding approach to advancing a program as strong and defensible as we can, given kind of the complexities that we're facing right now. And it is a much better overall situation than where we were 2 years ago in this corridor, and looking up at this point, and not yet to the point of things being quite as simple, slam dunkish as they were in 2019. But, hopefully, as more large employers announce return to office plans, we will see more of a rebound in commuter transit ridership as well as I-66 inside the Beltway toll revenues. Those have been relatively stable since the fall, about 60% of pre-pandemic levels, which is good that they've been fairly resilient, but not yet enough to result in a real appreciable windfall for the program. So this $12 million that we currently foresee consists exclusively of portions of outside the Beltway concessionaire payments that we expect to receive over the 2 years, as well as some carryover from closed out projects. So it's possible that it will end up ultimately being more money than $12 million, but it is just a modest, conservative estimate for the time being.
Can I ask pre-pandemic what that number was?
Yeah, so our MOA with the Commonwealth that kind of governs the program anticipated a total of about roughly $30 million for every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So most of that money coming from inside the Beltway.
Mhm.
But basically the way it works is, VDOT takes in the toll revenues, they pay their operating and maintenance expenses. Once they've done that, we start getting payments from them. So the faucet has started to kind of drip again. It's not really a torrent at this point.
And if I could, the year before the pandemic, we got $17 million. And that wasn't even including some funds that we're now getting from outside the Beltway to supplement.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a big change.
He has a question that I have.
Sure, go ahead.
Did we not at least negotiate for a but not less than amount in our agreement with VDOT?
Well, okay.
It's stipulated as a minimum payment, but ultimately it's based on what they're actually kind of taking in. There's a waterfall that sort of says as they take money in, here's the order in which the payments get made. So I mean, if they're taking in less than what the MOA says they're going to be paying us, like.
Yeah, there is
I mean, that's not how I remembered it. I thought
Yeah.
that they had an obligation to us, that as a minimum. But what you're telling me is not really.
Right.
It was a minimum if all the revenues came in and then they decide to do things like pull things off for bond issuance for Roslyn second station or second tunnel or whatever. But there's no additional appropriation to this category provided other than the revenues from the tours themselves.
So could you follow up on that and get the exact language out for folks? I think it's a good question. I had sort of the same recollection, so, because, yeah, they were gonna remove some money for the rail stuff, right, the bridge.
Yeah, that
But then
was.
they were gonna replace it, and was there a minimum guarantee there? There may not have been, I don't know.
Only if everything's above and beyond. So they haven't taken a single penny out for Long Ridge or anything. I mean, at this point, they haven't even been able to cover their own costs. The reason why we didn't see any money for a year is VDOT themselves weren't even covering their own costs. But there is a waterfall, and the idea was that if the revenues go above and beyond, you will be always guaranteed. So if they want to pull some off the rail improvements, there would still be the guarantee. Yeah. So we can pull that language out.
I don't know if this was covered in the agreement or where this might be spelled out, but who is actually auditing the books and ensuring, that the cost accounting is value-free, unbiased? Is it an independent group, or is this being done by VDOT?
This is VDOT manages the book, so I don't know who VDOT auditors are, but VDOT is they're the ones that manage inside the Beltway toll operation.
I understand, but I just want to I'm not implying anything. I would feel more comfortable knowing that somebody is independently checking the final allocations that are, or the final determination as to what funds are available and how their overhead costs categorically are allocated and determined.
We will follow up and ask VDOT. There's
All right.
questions. I think these are very good questions for us to ask.
Okay.
So that,
Yeah, go ahead.
we're now on this sheet, right? Okay.
Yes, definitely. on this sheet. Solidly.
Yeah, okay. So, I like the maximize long-term benefits and performance certainty. But then it says by funding in order and I think capital improvements are the things that provide a long-term certainty in terms of benefits. And you kind of stuck them last on the list, access transit improvements. Those improve, well, yeah, the rail capital, but what are capital projects for us?
Yes.
Did we get any bus capital projects applied for?
Nothing bus capital. The rail capital projects are contributions toward a second entrance at the Malston station. So a $4.5 million request for a roughly $140 million overall project. So this would help complete the funding picture for that project. And then a BRE station parking garage at Manassas Park, $2.5 million out of a roughly $30 to $31 million project. That parking structure, besides serving BRE, is also helping to kind of anchor, maybe ironically, a transit-oriented development around the station there. To kind of support a master plan, residential, commercial, mixed-use development. So those are the two rail capital proposals. And right, I mean, the idea with putting those at the top was, potential to benefit corridor commuters for a few decades to come. The kind of challenge with access to transit is just, looking at the kind of daily commute usage, peak period, peak direction. It's pretty modest. There is kind of a long-lived element with the trails as well.
As I say, probably the those are applications for credits.
The what?
The access to transit, those are applications for credits.
Right.
I just want to make it very simple. So those are
Yeah,
credits.
to transit, yeah. Okay, the Boston MU Metro Rail West entrance, would this be the first time we invested in that, or have we approved?
This would be the first
Who
time
else
for
is
us.
paying for it? I mean, is that a Metro?
There's county
Or is that
funding.
Arlington County's
There's a
100%?
lot, and this did come to us before, and we withdrew it upon request, so it's been there for a while, and it's kind of important. There's a lot of pieces that all kind of depend on each other.
If there was an NDGC investment, it would be less than 10% of the overall project cost.
Right, yeah. Yeah, the biggest piece is a MBTA funding request for $80 million that the county put in their current round as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so the thinking there kind of being, the rail capital, long-lived benefits to corridor commuters, bus service renewals. These are renewals of service that have been popular prior to the pandemic. A couple of them serve the Pentagon, which has been kind of a stronger trip destination still, but also routes beginning further out to the west. We'll be able to take advantage of the outside the Beltway Express lanes once those open up later this year, so more faster and more reliable trip there. Tdm Strategies, the one here is kind of focused on direct incentives to help bolster performance of existing options in the corridor. Bus service expansions, we kind of put that a bit lower just given uncertainty over what demand for more period peak direction bus service is going to be at this point. So it's kind of a bit of a segmentation of projects by category, not looking at who's in each category. We still have to score them and see how that shakes out. But kind of trying to think about how we can put forth, conservative as well as maximally defensible program, given still kind of challenging circumstances. So that's kind of the thinking in brief with the approach outlined here. I'm happy to take any further questions on that or discuss it or get any thoughts.
Anybody?
I said my thoughts. I mean, I wouldn't list them in that order, but
What does the order mean?
So looking at the funding we have available, sort of going top down through the categories, rail capital projects would be the highest priority for funding that's available. We look next at bus service renewals on the TDM, sort of our own kind of waterfall of sorts, similar to 66.
Part of the reason of having this is if we do go put everything scored, what we may find is that we have a mismatch of the applications to the available money. Like there could be fund the top 3, but let's say there's still 500,000 left over. Is there something else that we put into that next category? I mean, again, these are just sort of how we package things when we come back. All of these projects will still be scored. There's a technical score, there's a cost effectiveness score that takes into account the capital projects have cost effectiveness over a longer period of time, so they actually sort of amortized over. But again, they just want to think of the approach. Obviously, we play a bunch of different scenarios for you guys, for all of you.
Yeah, the order in which you list them does not impact the scores.
No, not at all.
John, what would your priority be? I mean, I was just curious.
Well, just as of the more of the capital investment types, I'm huge into capital infrastructure. I think that here today, here tomorrow, if we make those investments. But
Okay, so like TDM would go lower for you, but
it
rail
would,
capital
yeah,
would stay high.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And access transit would go much higher, and then the others probably stay in the order that they're in.
I'm gonna go down past, probably did not want me to do this, but I'm gonna ask it right now. So this is the first time, I think, maybe not the first time, that we've had trail projects come for this program. Both of these are physically located outside the Beltway. And yes, they do actually, one connects to Vienna, and the other one does connect to a commuter garage. The challenge we have in this program, this is why, obviously, because everything's reviewed, the data, the performance, how many people are moving because of the project is harder with the trails. And so that's something where we're gonna obviously work very closely, or probably already have with Fairfax County to make sure we get the right data for that. But they have been a political target in the past. That doesn't mean we don't wanna go there. I just those are circumstances have somewhat changed, with the CTV and the body will be taking these two. So we'll see how obviously the scoring will help us this too, but the trails are not something that we have risen high in the scoring. I don't know what the data is on this, but I'm frank and honest sort of how this group feels about this program in supporting trails that are not geographically located within the corridor.
I guess one of the issues that I would raise that isn't captured here is the unavailability of funding from other sources. In other words, there's money for capital projects. I share your view about capital, but there's all kinds of money for capital projects. It's much more difficult to get money for trails. It's much more difficult to get money for sidewalks. It's much more difficult to do the little things that in combination really create a system and actually serve what this is supposed to do. So I would suggest that one additional thing here might be looking for projects that are good projects that meet certain criteria but don't fit easily into other funding categories. Like if I want to do an interchange, I can get hundreds of millions of dollars, but try to get $100,000 for sidewalks or $100,000 for trails or whatever. So there's how this fits into the bigger picture of funding. It seems to me ought to be a relevant consideration. This ought to fund the kind of projects that meet criteria that aren't easily or not at all eligible.
And that's one of the
for
benefits
funding.
of our ability to use for transit operations in this program.
Yeah.
The technical challenge in the MOA is we do have a ceiling as to how much percentage of the money over a period of 9 years that can be for operations only. So there is a need to do some capital, for example, to make sure that we meet that 50% threshold for capital over 9 years. So, but that's part of the reason what's really nice about some of these bus operations ones is that they actually are covering something.
And the trails.
I I know a little bit less about trails, but not something completely.
Yeah, Libby?
Yeah, I'm assuming from what you say, we don't have pretty good data about how the trails are actually working. I mean, like how many people are using them, coming in, getting on transit. If they're not there, they're gonna maybe just say, forget it, I'm just getting in my car and driving in. Do we have much data on that? I'm guessing it's hard to get.
My understanding is that in some instances, the trail data is hard, because we're talking between 6 and 9 a.m. and 3 and 6 p.m. So, again, it's a little bit of a new space for us. That doesn't mean it's not, it's just a new space for us. It's a lot easier to have automatic passenger counters, how many people are getting on a bus.
Yeah,
Um,
so you need people out there to flag them down, and we'll give you a power bar if you'll tell us what you're doing.
Where
Right.
you're going.
Yeah, where you're going and why, yeah. Yeah, but-
none of this is, these are all eligible, right?
Yeah.
These are all being eligible, so we're gonna be continuing to work this through the process.
Yeah.
We do know that we have, the Commonwealth and the JRPT that we will be presenting to defend.
Right.
And so having the good solid data, which I hope we do,
Yeah,
is gonna help. with this.
it's hard to sell, but I think it's great. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
David?
Oh, I was just going to say, in the city of Fairfax, we're just 6 square miles, and we are an as-built community like Alexandria, Arlington. And there's a perception among some individuals in the community, also even among planners who are not familiar with trails, that somehow you can get a lot further, a lot longitudinally, you got a lot more distance for a lot less money. I want to dispel that myth. Trails now are without land acquisition, are somewhere between $900 and $1,400 a linear foot. Expensive. And the ADA requirements and the engineering requirements are significant. We are in our little city, over the starting 2 years ago and to right now, we're spending somewhere between $25 and $30 million on a series of trail connections that will total less than 3 miles, and we're spending close to $30 million. So it's not an inexpensive thing. And so as we look at these multimodal options vis-a-vis transit, we need to recognize that trails are categorically are almost as significant in a financial perspective as the other forms.
Okay, I think I've heard loud and clear. There's definitely not concerns about moving forward on this.
We like trails.
Historically, so that's why, they're in sport no matter what anyway. So-
Is one of our criteria in evaluating these things, the positive impact it has on reducing our carbon footprint, or is there any climate-related issues? If I'm walking along beside a diesel bus, which is all we've been buying, I'm probably creating less of a footprint.
Yeah, it's not explicitly in our process, but we are going to be looking at greenhouse gas and VMT benefits and projects as part of the sort of
Nobody provided
information
that
we're
data.
putting forward.
Is it part of the scoring?
It's not part of the scoring, but yeah, when we talked about this some of the last PAC meeting in September around zero emission buses, one of the things we kind of resolved to do coming out of that was, look at sort of in parallel to our evaluation, what are the environmental benefits of the projects that we're putting forward.
Yeah, I mean, because I just want to second, that was my question was going to be is it's all things being cost equal. Some things are better. If 2 things cost the same, if one is easier access, it's cheaper to buy a bike than to buy a car. So you've got an equity issue there. And it's also has almost, the environmental impact of that person on a bike than getting on the metro versus even the person in the bus, to be quite honest, So to whatever extent that is considered, I think it has to be considered, especially as like a transit organization who's conscious of this. I mean, in Alexandria, our emissions are like 30 to 40% of our emissions. So, I appreciate that comment and second it.
Okay, thanks. Excellent discussion. So Is this the next slide?
Yes, that is the next slide.
That's basically that timetable.
Yeah, just a quick synopsis of our next steps. So we will be moving to technical evaluation of the 9 eligible applications over the coming weeks. We will share the results of that scoring with you at the date goal and meet again to look at a draft program and projects. And we will be opening public comment around that time. It'll be fully online. For the first time, we'll be producing both English and Spanish versions of all of our materials. We are strategizing about how to get the word out most effectively. We've done paid locally targeted advertising under prior rounds, and kind of a small amount of investment can help make the comment period a lot more visible to people on Facebook and Twitter. I think we spent like $150 on our last comment period, and that did help kind of bump up our response rate. A lot more people saw the opportunity. But we also, how can we help our applicants help us in amplifying the word about the comment opportunity? So in May, we'll be rolling into briefings on the committee endorsed draft program of projects and then seeking approvals in June, distributing project agreements after that, and implementation of the funded projects when the new fiscal year begins.
Okay, the only caveat is you have to work through the false church bus question about the prior proposal that was removed under certain conditions. Those conditions didn't exist, and we reserve the right to resubmit. And so anyway, we have to work through that. Okay, thanks. Excellent discussion. Anything else, John?
Yeah, I mean, before we go to the next topic, we did have a conversation at our last meeting about the diesel buses versus the electric buses. Yeah, what I would suggest is that at an absolute minimum, that if we're going to consider diesel buses, which Fairfax County is, which I represent, is bad about this. I know that we were having a heck of a time making the conversion, but at a minimum, if we're going to invest in diesel buses, we should make the applicant come in and justify why it's diesel versus electric buses, I think. We got to get people's minds. I know what they're going to say is because ours are such long runs from, the government center out in Fairfax to Pentagon or whatever, that we're not yet at a point where we can be running back and forth with electric. But, we got to keep the focus and the pressure on that topic, I think. I'm not saying don't fund them. I'm not even saying don't penalize them, but make them justify why it's going to be diesel versus electric.
Yeah, I think because the technology keeps changing. So
Pardon?
the technology keeps changing. So, it makes sense one year. The next year, there might be something new. And if you're not looking back and checking it, you might miss it. So I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and we are having that conversation with people kind of in their pre-application workshops too. We started that this last time around. If they're looking at diesel, was different propulsion technology an option for them?
What's the lifespan on a diesel bus?
14 to 18.
How many?
Well, I say they consider the useful life to be 12 years.
Yeah, so,
Sometimes they do a rebuild, engine rebuild, so that it can get them longer.
yeah, that's a long time,
It's a long time.
to start with new ones now.
And they're big investments.
Yeah.
But as I say, a parallel path, and we hear a little bit about it later, is actually we're working with all of our regional transit operators to look at strategies to move to zero emission. So all the stations.
The last time around, we replaced our whole fleet with a hybrid diesel. And at the time, it sounded like, this is a good thing. But there were some real technical engineering maintenance problems that were pretty challenging for us. So.
And we have been looking at pulling that life, pushing it down. Don't replace them until you really, really have to.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're all in the same boat, or a bus, or whatever.
Same bus.
Yeah.
At least the same couple.
Yeah.
Buying the bus is the easy part of it. It's the infrastructure, the charge,
Yeah.
training of people.
Maintenance.
That's what we've been told, but nonetheless, I don't think we ought to, I agree. I think we ought to.
And there's a big dearth of diesel mechanics right now. So there's a lot of competition between the trucking industry, public transit, and other forms of diesel use. So
I guess we'll see some of the trucking industry in the next couple of weeks, right?
I hope we don't see him very long. I think they should be
I
arrested
wonder.
immediately, removed.
Okay,
That's
Envision Route 7 is the next item on the agenda. I didn't want to terminate any additional conversation.
There's
discussion.
definitely more in this space, we'll be coming back to you with lots more information later. Okay?
All right, Vision 7, speaking of doctors, this is a very, very high overview of where we are with this project. As you go to the next slide, just a quick reminder, a lot of you are very familiar with this project. It's a bus rapid transit project that Tyson's to the March Center via Falls Church and through the East Falls Church metro station, basically to maximize the ridership as much as possibly can. Working very, very closely with all of the folks in this room and all of your staffs on a daily basis to keep this project moving forward. So next slide, we're currently in the mobility analysis. Basically, we're looking at what does this look like in the real world? What does it look like to travelers on a day-to-day basis if they use this? What are the travel time savings? And the bigger part is what are the impacts of BRT on traffic and the operations of that? So when you start running a bus in dedicated lanes and shared lanes, what does that mean for traffic? What does that mean for the whole transportation network? So that's really what we're focusing on this phase. It's a very, very technical phase, as you'll see in the next slide going forward. But it is really important to point out that there's a lot of public stakeholder engagement planned. At this point, we're planning for this fall. It seems like it's all the way away. It's not. Getting ready to go out there, make sure we talk to folks along the community, along the corridor. This segment of the analysis is focusing primarily on the Falls Church section of it and a little bit into Arlington, a little bit into Fairfax, but the majority of the top place is in Falls Church. So we work with all of you as we get closer to that to help us get out the word about the type of outreach we want to do, make sure we're hitting the right communities, make sure we're talking to the right stakeholders, make sure we're coming to the councils and boards as we need to. So next slide.
So sorry, I have a question. Sorry, question.
Go ahead, Linda.
I'm sure it's out of the scope, but are we talking at all to the district in Montgomery County, for example? Are we talking to them about what their plans are? I just had this fun conversation with Mark Eldridge about 10 years ago now, long before some of us were doing things we're doing, and started talking about BRT and anyway, and he was like, well, if we could get it Montgomery County here and we could take it through the district and across to the Pentagon and connect with you guys.
Yep.
So I don't know. I mean, I assume they're doing stuff over there too. I should
They
probably know.
are. There's a lot of, actually, we talk with the district of Maryland a lot of different ways. One of them is on BRT, one is on
Yeah.
fare collection, one is on zero
Right.
emissions bus. We talk to them a lot. Now the actual day-to-day connections like you're talking to, everybody's working their plans forward. I know Maryland has a network in Montgomery County they're working on building out right now. We're working on building our network here. We've got Metroways, up and running. The next big one, I think, is southern part of Fairfax County along Route 1. That's coming up next. And then this is one of the ones that's coming along the planning pipeline. I think there are a lot of opportunities to continue talking with them on a regular basis. We do learn from what they're doing. They learn from us. So there's a lot of that information sharing. Even though we're not quite to the point of getting one route connecting them all together, we do talk to our regional colleagues.
Yeah, good. And I figured you probably did, and I just couldn't resist it because there's something just one little connection and suddenly, boom,
Yep.
it's kind of cool. So thank you.
Sure. So next slide. Next steps. So right now we're working very closely with the consultant team and also all of your staffs. Doing a lot of data collection, working on updating the traffic simulation model. That's the fun stuff. We'll have another update in April where we are. Hopefully have a little bit more of the public outreach refined a little bit more. Over the course of the summer, we'll keep refining all of the travel demand model, the traffic simulations, and getting ready for that really granular approach to the outreach. In the fall, we're going to jump into public meeting number 1, begin that outreach, continue working and refining that simulation and modeling work, and then we'll have regular updates to the PAC and also the commission. That's a very, very high level where we are now. We kicked off a couple of weeks ago with them. Your staff have been great. They've been doing already on several different calls, talking about how to get all the data we need from them to keep things moving. We are building this work off of what's already been done. Fairfax County has done a significant amount of work in the Tyson segment of this. We're taking what they did, building on top of it. The next phase, we'll build on top of it. We'll build on the entire. So that's a very high overview of this particular project. I'll stop there if there's any questions before I get into a little bit more of a strategic thing we want to talk to you about with this course.
Quick question. Sorry. Yeah, the traffic simulation, I've asked this before. I think the answer was no. Do they include these fun models where they put things in and you can watch these little models of cars going over roads and seeing how it works and you can change things? Are they able to do that?
I'm not sure. I know what you're talking about. I've done BRT projects in the past. I did the Transway project when I was with the city.
Yeah, they
When I was
did.
Andrew, we did that. as
Yep,
part
I
of
saw it. That's where I saw it.
It's very effective.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we can do that, but I can check and find out.
Okay, because that for public engagement, I mean, that just like, as you say, I'm still remembering it all these years later because it makes sense to me. It's, for your lay people.
And that is actually a huge part of this effort that we have going on right now. So that when we come to the fall, in particular, this is about the Falls Church footprint, where a lot of that will be in mixed-use traffic, or other sort of creative things, is really speaking to what this looks like, what it is and what it isn't.
Mhm.
Because I think there's a lot of fear, what it means to have, buses running in a corridor, if they have a dedicated lane or not. So I think that visualization, how we're able to make that work, I think will be really effective in our public engagement.
Yeah.
We have a really fantastic team led by Kittleson on this. So Neonish is the consultant for the outreach. And that was part of the reason that our technical team selected them, is that they had a really strong public outreach element to it. So we're really excited to what we can do and how, as I said, Milano talked about it, Mr. Chair, about how we can best engage the city in a number of different ways.
Yep. Cool, thank you.
Next slide. So one of the things we've been working on as parallel complementary effort to this larger Route 7 effort is a strategic implementation plan. If you stop and think about the history of this project, it's been going on since around 2012, I think. We've been making steady and deliberate progress with our partners at the RPT, with all the folks along the corridor. And as we've been talking through this project, and you can start to see that end scope of where you want this project to go, we decided to take a step back, look at how do we get there. We were doing the technical. Now let's getting into the strategic of when do you apply for certain types of money? What is the governance of this type of project? Right now, we have a project that crosses 4 jurisdictions. Who's owning it? Who's doing what? Who's building what? Who's responsible for what? It gets a little bit more complicated. This is not unfamiliar in the transit world. But basically taking that strategic approach and making sure that we're really deliberate going forward in what we're doing. So the idea is to build a flexible and adaptable roadmap that as we go forward, the commission makes decisions on who's going to own a certain segment of it. Does NBTC, for example, do we get all the way through NEPA, which is an environmental analysis, then we turn it over to somebody else? What are those strategic points and decision points? The implementation, you build the entire project all at once, or you build in phases that make sense. And some of them may start out a little bit earlier. Eventually, it's going to ultimately tie into the BRT down Alexandria. How do you make sure the timing of all of those is correct? And then also the strategic funding side. There's a lot of money floating out that we talked about for capital, but it's like, where do you go? And the more important one is like, when? It takes a year or so to figure out what exactly you need. You've got to get your local match ready. You've got to get your grant application ready. They're all on different cycles. We can name 5 or 6 different places you go to for money. What does that look like, and the when, and the best time to do it, and what are the resources we need in order to make that happen? So this is a effort that we're working on the scope with Fairfax County. Work very closely with their staff, share funding to do this, so we don't have to come back to everybody. Fairfax County was gracious enough to work very closely with us, since most of the project is in Fairfax County, but the plan will benefit the entire corridor.
It would be led by us.
Correct, and led by us, so we would do that work going forward. So right now, we anticipate coming back to the commission in May to receive approval to put out RFP to do this study and then provide the documentation and the plan for us. I know, Mr. Collins, you'll see it very shortly at one of your upcoming meetings, I believe in March. You'll see an action that is a complementary action for you all as part of it, and then our part will be in May, and we'll move forward with procurement. But I think we've had very, very good meetings with Fairfax County staff and civil servant leadership, talking through this, the benefit of it. And so I just wanted to give you an update if that's something that is coming down the pipeline, and happy to answer any questions.
That's great.
Sounds good.
Sounds complex.
Well, I have to say, as somebody who's been involved with this project for 7 years, I think it's especially in light of the federal infrastructure investment levels, having a game plan.
Mhm.
And that even includes when is there a smart scale, is there authority, is there federal, what's the right place? I think we can get some really smart folks helping us think through that. So we're excited, and we're also excited we're able to use it with some of our internal resources again, matching that with Fairfax County.
Great. Any questions?
All right.
Well, thank you.
Great, no, we're excited.
Thank you very much.
That's
I'm
great.
excited.
It is
A
exciting.
little bit more, Mr. Chair, 2 more things and then we wrap it up. Okay. So, this is something you will be seeing actually next week at the commission meeting. So, then I think that I will perfect. So, we are looking at submitting 2 different DRPT grants for technical assistance. We've done this over the years for a variety of different reasons. The visually submitted the technical assistance grant. But what we wanted to do is go back and look at where strategically are there opportunities for us to continue to look at transit in Northern Virginia. One of the areas was building off of the Northern Virginia Regional Cost Analysis is our working title for the moment. It builds off some work that we did way back in 2016. We did that back then looking at what is possible like in Northern Virginia, what is the coverage, what is the opportunities, are there gaps, things like that. 2016, fast forward 6 years, a lot has changed since that analysis was done. Metro is in a very different place. We've had a pandemic. A lot of things have just changed at the local level. So what does it look like building off the work that all of you all do individually with your transit strategic plans, which are submitted to DRPT every year? So looking back at that, what is the best bus network look like now? Looking at where are there opportunities, where there are service gaps, opportunities for shared service coordination. I think that's a really important one going forward, especially when you start to talk about that electrification potentially, things like that. If you want to have 5 different types of chargers at the metro station, now we want one that everybody can use and share facilities and shared infrastructure. Leading to that. Also, just general overview of the financial needs. What are the financial needs, capital and operating going forward over the next several years? So basically, as all of your individual organizations do this on an individual basis, this pulls us back up to 40,000 feet. What do we look at from a regional point of view? Now, that's where we think NBTC is strategically placed to be able to look at that regional level, bring everybody together. This effort will include everybody from all the jurisdictions, make sure they're providing information, providing feedback, giving us information, helping us develop the results and the recommendations that come out of this.
If I could add to that, because the other thing I think that's really important is as the WMATA is looking at their own bus redesign, that is a part of this, because we do have WMATA serving in Northern Virginia. So just like we did somewhat on a shoestring, our regional bus agenda 5 years ago, this would really be looking at that comprehensive, somewhat agnostic of provider, but I'm hoping that it actually then enlightens all of the providers as to where they want to move forward. So we're really excited to be able to get DRPT to help us support this type of effort.
I'm moving to the last one. We've already touched a little bit on this. So the other grant that we'd like to apply for is basically to generate and create a Northern Virginia zero emissions bus strategic plan. If you think back to last year, we had a symposium. We had a bunch of great speakers come in and really talk about the opportunities and mainly the challenges that come along with going towards zero emission bus fleets. So basically what we're looking at again is taking that regional approach, looking at all the work that everybody is doing in this space. Where is the industry? What is the best thing, best way forward as a region? Kind of think of it as the same model as we've done with the fare collection. There's a regional approach, regional goals, things you want to do. Now, each individual transit provider may go a slightly different path, but we're all going down towards the same goal. This is the same thing. Same type of approach. There are potentially economies of scale when it comes to planning, when it comes to purchasing, when it comes to investing in infrastructure, making sure that everything is compatible. Like I mentioned a couple months earlier, we don't want things that are all out of whack. Everybody has their own system, and they're done that. How can we make sure we don't do that again? And then also engaging with everybody very, very closely. One of the things actually that Patricia Happ is going to be starting up in the next month or so is a zero emissions bus working group that includes folks represented from all of your jurisdictions. And I just want to say we've had a wonderful response. Folks are really excited, very happy to join, very happy to share their expertise and share what they've learned. I've also had interest from folks across the river, from DDOT and from Maryland. Folks want to be engaged in this space. And also, we're very much engaged in COGS space on this, TPD, all the work they're doing over there. But also, this effort would focus on Northern Virginia. That's where we are, and focusing on the role that the commission can play with leading those efforts going out there, making sure we're helping add to what the information is out there, making those strategic investments where we can, but also allowing people to get down their own path and at their own rate. Because as you mentioned, it's going to be, some folks may want to go one way, electric, some may want to go hybrid, some may want to go other fuel sources. So there's
Hydrogen.
right, there's other options out there. So that's kind of where it is. We'll spend a lot of time. You will hear if we get this grant funding, we'll work with the DRPT. Hopefully, if we get that, we'll get a lot of engagement with this committee, with the commission, and then obviously at the staff level. There's a lot of excitement. I think we've heard from you all from the commission meeting a couple months ago, and also from staff at the local level to move forward with this. So we're really excited to bring this to you next week.
Again, this pivoting, by doing this effort, it actually helps put any of our jurisdictions in a good position if they wish to look to the federal $5.6 billion a year in low and no emission buses, for example. So.
It's great.
Yes, John.
What would the timing be on this? I mean, I am extraordinarily frustrated with Fairfax County staff because they've given us years of, studying and running demonstration projects and stuff like that. We don't need any more delay. What is your deadline?
For this study, we're looking at 12 to 18 months to do that. And what it's going to include is very close collaboration with each one of your jurisdictions about an implementation plan. They're all working on it in very different ways, to helping them guide towards that, instead of make sure that they are going to implement, they don't get on a path that prevents them from collaborating with others and coordinating with others. So think of this as your 40,000 foot plan. And a lot of it will be actions focused on what MVTC can do and what's within our realm of things to do, helping, adding value on the folks and providing that technical guidance, that policy guidance and policy assistance. Now, each individual jurisdiction is going to move at their own speed. We're hoping that this can help move things all kind of smooth the way. So we're all learning from each other. We're learning from folks in Maryland and DC, and we're learning for the industry at large in the country.
So I heard 12 to 18 months, at the end of which you will deliver a product.
A strategic plan, correct. That would come to you all for endorsement, which then directs us to this is the plan, go forth and do it.
It'll help you deal with your staff a little more maybe once they've got.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I mean,
Yeah.
we need to light some fires.
Yeah, so, and maybe they've got some
And not
blockages.
use coal when we do that.
Do you mind breaking down for me how the 50% local match works on both of these? Is it, go ahead.
So typically, we have a SAM formula, which is subsidy allocation model. Scott's not here to be able to explain the mechanics of it. Basically what it is based on a formula of money that comes, the state aid that comes into MVTC on behalf of the jurisdictions. And based on that formula, that 50% would then get divided amongst the six. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but we could find that out for sure and get that number to you. Because we will be, as part of the authorization next week, if we're approved for this grant by DRPT, we'll know in the next couple of months, hopefully, probably like April, May timeframe, that we draft SIP. Then we would reach out to folks, this is what your financial obligation will be as part of this.
Okay, I'm just going through the budget process for the first time, in Alexandria, and trying to think about.
Oh, you poor.
Trying to figure out where,
First 5 times are missed.
Yeah, you're in this, you'll never get out, you know?
You're gonna be fine. Don't listen to them. You'll be fine.
Okay, any further discussion on these? What I'm getting from the discussion is we think these are two pretty good things for us to go after. So, yeah.
But can I just say, the first one, there was a lot of pushback the last time you did that gap analysis. How do you avoid that this time?
They're actually really enthusiastic now.
They seem
Our
enthusiastic.
jurisdictions are enthusiastic of this
Okay.
effort.
Okay.
wait, what was the pushback on the bus analysis?
Yeah, because it was
Rooted
so
in.
duplicative of what
Each
the
individual did?
localities were doing. They were
Oh.
being told what they already knew type of thing.
Yeah.
And it was not well received. It really wasn't. It was unpleasant for a while there.
Well, we aim to not repeat that, and we aim to make sure that part of our motto is where we add value. We're not trying to tell any individual jurisdiction what to do. We want to help them. We want to make sure what they're doing is better. And also, again, at the regional level, are there things that they're doing where if you bring it up to a regional level, you can share costs, you can share investments, you can share policy frameworks to allow your service to get better and better. That's where we want to add the value, because their ultimate goal, better transit in Virginia.
I think it's helped. It seems to me that the elected officials are pretty much all aligned so that we all go back to our staff and say, you need to do this. You know, and I don't want to criticize staff because they actually have to make it happen. And I totally understand. You think, well, let's just go there. And they realize all the things that have to happen to get you there. But I think it does help that this group is bringing together a group of elected officials and we're all there and we're all going back and saying, you know, make this happen. And it's great, actually. It's good. I just want to say that this is a fun committee. I'm just going to say, these are cool presentations and fun projects, exciting, and thank you.
And I think in the context of so we don't avoid that again, this is collaborative. We're sharing concepts and we're sharing expertise. It's a professional collaboration, kind of a community of interest of professionals in the field. And the staffs can, when they get together, ought to be very intentional about breaking down those stovepipes and talking sort of value free across the region. And then they can say, okay, this is where we fit in, and this is where we can fit in.
A key thing will be to engage staff in the definition of the scope of what you're proposing to do. Because
We've shared the scope with a lot of us with folks out there to make sure they see what it is ahead of time. We've taken comments on it, different things like that. So make sure we're not just going in there, this isn't just us driving the ship. We did share it with them to make sure that there was a way for them to put their 2 cents in.
that's
We didn't get a
all.
whole lot of comments, but they had a chance to see it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Awesome.
I agree with you. It's a good committee.
It's fun. No, this is just.
Yeah, this is real stuff.
Good. Any other comments?
Welcome, Sarah.
Okay, so, says here before we close, like ending every good meeting, you have to schedule the next one.
Already done.
And it's already here, April 14, 4 p.m. So, any questions? Yeah, John.
For whatever reason, they were unable to accommodate my schedule, so I will not be here on the 14th.
Oh.
Do we want to try to, why don't we run it one more time? See.
We're giving many choices.
Happy to do.
Try to run it one more time and see what we can do to get everybody here. Is it the time or the day, or both?
I don't know.
I bet you're in your budget. I bet it's budget conflicts.
Yeah,
That's
that
my
might be
guess.
budget week,
Yeah, that's my guess.
which I can, means that in the morning I can do it, but at 1 o'clock we sit down and we
Never come
get
back.
testimony all day.
Well, let's do a little bit more research.
Let's see what we could do. I mean,
Yeah.
is early morning, is that better? I mean, how does that?
I'm not a
I'm
morning
usually,
person, but
I usually, it's, my schedule's got so much because of COVID. I mean, I used to just go from the time I got there till the time I left.
Just
Meeting with
Patty will know, won't she?
Huh?
Patty will know, won't she?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
let's do it.
You
We'll
will do our
assume,
best.
yeah, we'll assume this unless we
Yeah.
can sort of make it work for everybody. Well, thanks. Does anybody have anything else they want to raise?
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Kate and the staff. And it just takes an extraordinary amount of work for every one of these presentations and all the work and the technical folks to make it happen. So thank you to everybody and all the people, the backbenchers there who really make things happen. Right? We know.
Unlike my committee, which is just like
So moved.
Second.
fudge factory.
All those in
Puzzle
favor,
palace.
aye. Your first and
Dealing
foremost.
with
That's my first.
Well, you